The hotel was supposed to be a stopover, nothing more than a place to sleep before the boys boarded their bus home the next morning. It stood just off the brighter stretch of the Las Vegas Strip, close enough to hear the distant hum of traffic and neon, but far enough that families often chose it over louder resorts. In the spring of 2000, the building was already showing its age. Muted carpeting, narrow hallways, and a layout that felt like it had been altered too many times to make sense anymore. 3 Boy Scouts were staying there that night as part of a regional scouting trip. They were among dozens of children spread across several floors, supervised by adult leaders who believed the hotel was safe. The boys were young, one just 10 years old, the other 2 12. They came from different backgrounds, different families, and different neighborhoods, but the uniforms made them identical in the eyes of anyone passing by. Brown shirts, green trousers, neatly tucked neckerchiefs, polished shoes. That uniform would be the last thing anyone ever saw of them. The evening passed without incident. After dinner, the scouts gathered in small groups, laughing, trading stories from the day, some already half asleep from exhaustion. A head count was taken shortly before lights out. All 3 boys were present. Another check followed later that night, sometime after 10. Still there. No concerns. No alarms. But by morning, 3 beds were empty. At first, no one panicked. Scouts wandered between rooms. Adults assumed the boys had gone downstairs early, maybe to explore or find a vending machine. A staff member was asked to check the lobby. Another checked the breakfast area. Their names were called softly at first, then louder, echoing down hallways that suddenly felt longer than they had the night before. They didn't answer. Security footage showed the boys leaving their assigned floor shortly after 11:30 p.m. The grainy video captured them stepping into an elevator together, still in uniform, one of the older boys pressing the button while the youngest leaned against the wall. They looked calm, curious, like kids sneaking out past bedtime. The camera recorded the elevator doors closing. That was the last confirmed image of them alive. What should have happened next never did. The elevator logs indicated a stop, but the camera covering that level malfunctioned within minutes. Hotel staff insisted it was a coincidence. They claimed the system had been unreliable for weeks. Investigators later discovered that this particular camera failure was oddly precise, offline for just over an hour, then fully functional again. By midday, the hotel was crawling with police. Search teams combed every guest room, storage area, stairwell, and service corridor. Maintenance unlocked doors most guests never knew existed. Ceiling tiles were removed. Utility closets were emptied. The parking garage was searched twice. Dogs were brought in. They hit on nothing. Not a scent. Not a scrap of fabric. Not a footprint. The case exploded into local news within hours. 3 children. 1 hotel. No explanation. The initial theory was simple. The boys had wandered off. Maybe they'd gotten lost. Maybe someone outside the hotel had taken advantage of their trust. Las Vegas was full of strangers. Full of opportunity. That theory unraveled quickly. No witnesses reported seeing 3 scouts outside that night. No taxi drivers. No security guards. No street cameras picked them up leaving the property. It was as if they had stepped out of the elevator and vanished into the building itself. The search widened. Drains were checked. Dumpsters were torn apart. Nearby construction sites were shut down and inspected. Parents arrived from out of state, standing in the lobby, clutching photos that still smelled like home. The hotel's atmosphere shifted. Guests complained of strange noises, of doors closing on their own, of hallways that felt colder than the rest of the building. After a week, the FBI joined the investigation. They mapped the hotel in ways the staff never had. Old blueprints were requested. Renovation permits. Maintenance records. What they found was troubling. Over the years, walls had been added. Rooms had been split. Entire sections had been closed off and repurposed. Some areas shown on early plans no longer existed, or so it seemed. Still, nothing explained how 3 boys could disappear without leaving behind a single item. No backpack. No neckerchief. No shoe. The case dragged on for months. Tips poured in from across the country. Most went nowhere. A man claimed he'd seen 3 boys matching the description at a bus station. It was a lie. Another insisted they were part of a trafficking ring. No evidence supported it. Psychic leads. Hoaxes. False confessions. By the 1-year mark, the investigation slowed. The hotel quietly changed hands not long after. New management. Minor renovations. A fresh coat of paint. The disappearance became something staff were warned never to discuss. Guests who asked questions were told it was an urban legend, exaggerated by the media. But the families never stopped looking. 15 years passed. In that time, the Strip transformed. New towers rose. Old buildings fell. The hotel, now outdated and barely profitable, was finally scheduled for partial demolition. Contractors arrived with heavy equipment, tasked with removing interior walls to modernize the structure. It was during this process, deep into the building's core, that something unexpected happened. A worker struck a section of drywall that didn't sound hollow. Behind it was another wall. That alone wasn't unusual in an older building. What was unusual was the space between them. A narrow cavity, sealed off deliberately, not marked on any blueprint the crew had been given. When they widened the opening, the smell hit first, stale, metallic, untouched by fresh air for over a decade. Inside the space was a small, forgotten restroom. The fixtures were outdated. The pipes corroded. Dust lay thick on every surface. It was the kind of place no guest had used in years, maybe ever. And on the floor, folded neatly side by side, were 3 uniforms. Brown shirts. Green trousers. Child-sized. The foreman shut the site down immediately. Police were called. Then detectives. Then people who had once sworn they would never return to this case. The uniforms were intact. Clean. Preserved far better than anyone expected. No bodies were present. No blood visible to the naked eye. But the way the clothes had been placed, careful, deliberate, sent a chill through everyone in that room. Someone had wanted them to be found. As word spread, one question resurfaced with terrifying clarity. If the uniforms were here, where were the boys? And more importantly, how had no one discovered this space during 15 years of searching? The discovery reopened wounds that had never truly healed. Within hours, the abandoned construction site became a controlled crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across hallways that hadn't seen police presence in over a decade. Former investigators were contacted, some now retired, others scattered across the country. New detectives stood beside old ones, studying the narrow restroom hidden behind 2 layers of wall, trying to understand how it had been missed so completely. The uniforms were removed carefully, sealed in evidence bags, and sent to a forensic lab. Under harsh white lights, technicians examined every seam, every button, every fold. At first glance, the clothing appeared untouched by time. But closer inspection told a different story. Microscopic traces of dried blood were found along the inner hems of 2 shirts. The stains were faint, invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable under testing. All 3 pairs of trousers showed signs of having been washed thoroughly before being folded and placed inside the hidden room. Someone had cleaned them. Someone had taken their time. Inside the pockets, investigators found nothing. No scraps of paper. No personal items. No clues that might suggest how the boys ended up there. It was as if every trace of their identities had been stripped away, leaving only the uniform they wore when they disappeared. The restroom itself raised even more questions. It wasn't on any of the hotel's current floor plans. Older blueprints hinted at a utility bathroom once accessible through a service corridor, but that corridor had been sealed off years before the boys vanished. During a renovation in the late 1990s, walls were added, rooms were expanded, and the bathroom disappeared behind new construction. Official records described it as decommissioned. Yet the dust patterns suggested someone had entered the space long after it was sealed. Footprints, partial and degraded, were identified near the back wall. The tread didn't match any construction boots used during recent demolition. Investigators estimated the prints were years old, but not 15. Someone had been there well after the disappearance. Possibly more than once. As news of the discovery broke, the families were notified. For them, it was hope and horror intertwined. The uniforms confirmed what they had always believed, that their sons never left the hotel. That they hadn't run away. That something had happened inside those walls. But the absence of remains reopened the worst possibility of all, that the truth was still hidden somewhere nearby. Detectives began re-examining the original investigation, this time with fresh eyes. They noticed things that hadn't stood out before. Witness statements from hotel staff were inconsistent. Several employees who worked the night shift in 2000 had left within months of the disappearance. One maintenance worker had vanished from employment records entirely, his name missing from tax filings after that year. At the time, it had been dismissed as coincidence. Now, it felt deliberate. Security logs showed anomalies. Access doors that should have remained locked were recorded as briefly opening during the same window when the third-floor cameras failed. Maintenance tunnels ran beneath the hotel, connecting to storage rooms, laundry facilities, and old service shafts no longer in use. Some of these tunnels had never been searched thoroughly, deemed too narrow or unstable at the time. A new search was ordered. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. K-9 units returned. Walls were tapped. Floors were scanned. The building, once thought to have been fully mapped, revealed a maze of forgotten spaces, crawlways sealed behind drywall, access panels hidden above ceilings, and locked steel doors no one could account for. Then came the interviews. One former night employee, now living in another state, hesitated before speaking. He said the hotel had felt wrong back then, that there were areas staff avoided after dark. He described hearing what sounded like running water and muffled noises late at night, coming from parts of the building that weren't supposed to be accessible. He'd reported it once. No one followed up. Another former worker recalled seeing a man he didn't recognize wearing a maintenance uniform the week after the boys disappeared. The uniform looked official, but the badge was wrong. The man's hands, he said, were badly scarred, dark stains along the knuckles that looked old, not fresh. At the time, the employee assumed he was a contractor. Now, that memory took on a different weight. The most disturbing revelation came from a box of personal effects returned to one of the families years earlier. At the time, it had seemed insignificant, a disposable camera found in a communal area, assumed to belong to one of the scouts. The film had been developed in 2000, but the photos were blurry and poorly lit. They showed nothing obvious. The case moved on. That camera was retrieved from storage. Modern enhancement revealed details missed the first time. One image showed a corridor that didn't match any guest floor. The walls were unfinished. Exposed piping lined the ceiling. A shadow stretched across the frame, tall, distorted, human. Another photo captured a reflective surface, possibly a mirror, with a faint outline behind the photographer. Someone else had been there. The timestamp on the film placed the photos hours after the boys were last seen. Whoever took them had access to restricted areas of the hotel, and they wanted proof of where they'd been. Investigators realized something chilling. The uniforms hadn't been hidden to conceal a crime. They'd been preserved, kept like artifacts. The restroom wasn't a random hiding spot, it was a deliberate choice. A place sealed away but still accessible to someone who knew exactly how the building worked. Someone who could move unseen, bypass cameras, and alter the environment itself. As demolition continued under police supervision, crews uncovered something else. Behind another wall, deeper within the structure, was an access hatch leading into the maintenance tunnels. The metal was scratched, recently disturbed, and inside the tunnel, just beyond the reach of light, was something that caused the entire site to go silent. A child-sized shoe. Worn, dirty, and unmistakably part of a Boy Scout uniform. The tunnel stretched on into darkness, branching in multiple directions beneath the hotel, some leading toward sections that had never been excavated. As investigators prepared to enter, one question loomed larger than ever. If the uniforms were trophies, and the tunnel was the path, how far had the truth been buried beneath the building? The tunnel was narrower than expected, forcing investigators to move single file. Decades of dust coated the concrete floor, disturbed only by a set of partial footprints that faded in and out as the passage stretched forward. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of rust and stagnant water. This was not a place meant for children, or anyone, to be. The shoe was catalogued and bagged, but its presence alone confirmed what many had feared. The boys hadn't vanished into the city. They hadn't been taken far. They had been led downward, into the hidden anatomy of the hotel itself. As the search teams advanced, they discovered the tunnel branched repeatedly, some paths ending abruptly at collapsed walls, others disappearing beneath sealed doors bolted from the outside. Several sections had been deliberately reinforced, as if someone wanted to ensure they would never be disturbed. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that this wasn't random construction. Someone had known exactly which areas to alter and which to leave untouched. In one narrow offshoot, investigators found scratch marks along the concrete wall, uneven, frantic, at a height consistent with children. Nearby, embedded in a crack, was a small piece of green fabric. Testing later confirmed it matched the trousers from the uniforms found behind the wall. But still, no bodies. The absence became its own terror. 4 days, the search continued. Engineers mapped the tunnel system in full for the first time, discovering that parts of it extended beneath adjacent properties, built long before modern regulations existed. Some tunnels had been sealed decades earlier, their entrances erased from memory. Others showed signs of repeated access, foot traffic, replaced bolts, even modern tools left behind. Someone had been returning. The investigation took a darker turn when forensic results came back from the uniforms. Along with trace blood, analysts found hair fibers woven into the fabric, none belonging to the boys. The samples didn't match anyone in existing databases. More disturbing still were the tiny fragments found in the seams, fingernail clippings, intentionally placed, as if hidden. It suggested something deeply personal, methodical, ritualistic. Detectives began to theorize that the perpetrator wasn't an outsider. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was planned by someone who understood the hotel's blind spots, its renovations, its forgotten spaces. Someone who could predict where walls would be built years in advance, or influence where they were placed. Attention turned again to the renovation that followed the disappearance. Records showed a subcontractor hired briefly during that period, brought in to assist with structural changes. His paperwork was incomplete. His listed address led nowhere. Attempts to track him down failed. It was as if he'd stepped into the project, altered the building in crucial ways, and then erased himself. Former employees were interviewed once more, this time under oath. One recalled hearing voices late at night during the weeks after the disappearance, childlike, echoing faintly through vents. He'd convinced himself it was pipes settling. Another admitted that access logs had been falsified, not by management, but by someone with maintenance-level clearance. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now, it looked like concealment. The most unsettling revelation came from an overlooked piece of evidence. A janitorial closet key, found in a lost-and-found drawer years ago, was re-examined. Etched into the metal were 3 shallow marks. Not scratches. Intentional lines. 1 short. 2 longer. Possibly a count. Possibly initials worn away. When compared to maintenance records, investigators noticed something chilling. Every time the hotel underwent structural changes over the next 15 years, those specific tunnel sections were avoided. Walls were built around them. Floors were reinforced above them. As if someone, somewhere, was guiding the process. Protecting something. Or someone. Despite weeks of searching, the tunnels yielded no remains. Ground scans suggested voids deeper below, but excavation risked destabilizing neighboring buildings. Legal battles followed. Property owners resisted. Time dragged on. Public interest surged, then fractured. Some believed the boys had been moved long ago. Others believed the truth was still buried beneath the city, unreachable by design. Online forums filled with theories, sightings, confessions that led nowhere. The case officially reopened, but no arrests were made. Years later, a final piece of evidence surfaced. During the cataloging of items recovered from the hidden restroom, an investigator noticed something unusual about the tiles beneath the sink. One was loose. Beneath it was a small, waterproof pouch. Inside were 3 photographs. They were not of the boys. They were of the hotel. Each image showed a different stage of construction. Walls half-built. Tunnels exposed. And in the corner of every photo, barely visible, was a reflection, someone holding the camera. Their face obscured by shadow. Their eyes impossible to make out. On the back of the last photo was a handwritten note. No names. No dates. Just 4 words. They are still here. To this day, no one can say with certainty what happened to the 3 Boy Scouts who vanished that night. No remains have ever been recovered. No suspect has ever been identified. The hotel no longer stands, replaced by something newer, brighter, louder. But beneath it, the ground remains disturbed. And some investigators still believe that the truth, sealed behind concrete, steel, and silence, has never really left that place at all. What do you think really happened to the 3 Boy Scouts that night? Were they hidden away all along, or did someone, or something, take them far from here? I want to hear your theories in the comments below. And if you want to keep uncovering mysteries like this one, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chilling story. Your support keeps these investigations alive.